The water was so cold it burned. That was Eliza Morton's last coherent thought before the blackness started creeping in from the edges of her vision. Her wool traveling dress had become a death trap, the heavy fabric dragging her down into the churning current of the Snake River. She couldn't feel her fingers anymore, couldn't feel her legs. The November ice water had stolen everything from her in less than a minute. Above her, she could hear screaming. The other passengers from the stagecoach that had careened off the mountain road, but their voices were growing distant, muffled, as if she were sinking deeper into some terrible dream. 23 years old, and this was how it would end. Frozen in a river in the middle of the Wyoming wilderness, miles from anywhere, running from a man she'd been forced to marry, running toward a future that would never come. The current pulled her under again, and Eliza stopped fighting. Her lungs burned. The cold had become almost peaceful now, a gentle numbness spreading through her chest. Maybe this was better than going back to Boston, better than facing Henry Blackwell and his cruel hands, his crueler words. Her eyes drifted closed, and then something grabbed her, hard, impossibly strong fingers locked around her wrist, yanking her upward with such force she thought her arm might tear from its socket. Her head broke the surface, and she gasped, choking on air and water, her body convulsing. "I've got you!" A deep voice rumbled above her. "Stop fighting me!" But Eliza couldn't stop. Her body had taken over, panicking, thrashing in the water even as those iron hands dragged her toward the riverbank. She caught a glimpse of him, a massive silhouette against the grey November sky, water streaming from his shoulders as he waded through the current that had nearly killed her, as if it were nothing more than a summer creek. He hauled her onto the muddy bank like she weighed no more than a child, and immediately Eliza's body betrayed her. She vomited river water, her whole frame shaking so violently her teeth clattered together. She couldn't catch her breath, couldn't think, couldn't. "You're in shock," the man said, his voice calm despite the urgency in his movements. "We need to get you warm, now." Through her blurred vision, Eliza saw him more clearly. He was enormous, well over 6 feet, with shoulders that seemed to block out the sun, dark hair plastered to his head, a thick beard, and eyes that were the color of storm clouds. He wore buckskins and a heavy coat that he was already shrugging off. "No," Eliza tried to say, but her jaw was shaking too hard to form words. "Not asking permission," he said flatly. He wrapped his coat around her, but it did nothing. She was too far gone, the cold too deep in her bones. "Damn it!" He looked up toward the road where the stagecoach had crashed. Eliza could hear voices up there, people calling for help, but they sounded so far away. The man's jaw clenched. "Can't wait for them," he muttered. "You'll be dead in 10 minutes. Before Eliza could process what was happening, he scooped her up in his arms and started running, not toward the road and the other passengers, but away from it, into the dense pine forest that lined the river. Each step jolted through her frozen body, but she couldn't even protest. Her lips had gone numb. Her vision was darkening again at the edges. "Stay with me," the man commanded, his voice cutting through the fog in her mind. "What's your name?" Eliza," she managed through chattering teeth. "Eliza. Good. I'm Marcus Stone. And you're going to be fine, you understand me? You're going to be fine." She wanted to believe him, but her body was shutting down. She'd read about this once. In a medical journal her father kept in his study. Hypothermia, the body's core temperature dropping, organ failure, death. Marcus was moving fast through the trees, his breathing steady despite carrying her weight. Eliza caught glimpses of the forest flashing past. Towering pines, patches of early snow, a hawk circling overhead, and then suddenly a cabin appeared in a small clearing. It was rough-hewn and small, with a stone chimney from which no smoke rose. Marcus kicked the door open and carried her inside, laying her on a narrow bed in the corner. "This is going to be uncomfortable," he said, already moving to the fireplace, striking flint with practiced efficiency. "But you'll live through it." Within seconds he had a fire blazing, but even as the flames grew, Eliza knew it wouldn't be enough. The cold had sunk too deep. Her whole body was shutting down, her heart struggling to beat, her lungs barely drawing breath. Marcus knew it too. She could see it in his face as he turned back to her, saw the grim set of his mouth. "Your clothes need to come off," he said. "All of them. They're wet and they're killing you." Eliza tried to shake her head, tried to protest, but her body wouldn't respond. Marcus didn't wait for permission. His hands, steady and sure, began working at the buttons of her dress. Even in her dying state, Eliza felt a flutter of panic, of shame. "I'm not going to hurt you," Marcus said, his voice gentler now, "and I'm not going to do anything improper. But if I don't get you warm in the next few minutes, you're going to die. Do you understand?" She managed the smallest nod. He stripped her efficiently, his eyes never lingering, his touch clinical despite the intimacy of it. Layer after layer of wet clothing came off, the heavy dress, the petticoats, the corset, the chemise, until she lay trembling in nothing but her skin. Marcus immediately wrapped her in the rough wool blankets from the bed, rubbing her arms and legs through the fabric, trying to generate warmth through friction, but it wasn't enough. Eliza could feel herself slipping away, the darkness creeping back in. "Damn it!" Marcus swore. He stood abruptly, and Eliza heard the rustle of clothing. Through her half-closed eyes, she saw him stripping off his own wet clothes, the buckskin shirt, the pants, until he stood in nothing but his underthings. His body was massive, corded with muscle, scarred in places she couldn't quite focus on. "This is the only way," he said, more to himself than to her. "The only way to transfer body heat fast enough." He climbed into the narrow bed beside her, pulling her against his chest, wrapping his huge frame around her small, frozen one. Eliza should have been terrified, should have fought, but she was too far gone, and some part of her understood that this man was trying to save her life. His body was furnace-hot against her ice-cold skin. The contrast was almost painful, like being burned and frozen at the same time. Eliza whimpered. "I know," Marcus murmured against her hair. "I know it hurts, but you need to hold on. Just hold on." He rubbed her back, her arms generating friction, sharing his warmth. One massive hand cradled the back of her head, holding her face against his chest. Eliza could hear his heartbeat, strong and steady, and she focused on that sound, using it as an anchor to keep from drifting away. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. Eliza lost track of time, but slowly, painfully, feeling began to return to her extremities. First her fingers, tingling and burning, then her toes, then her legs, her arms, her core. And with the return of feeling came awareness that she was naked, pressed against a stranger's body, awareness that his arms were wrapped around her, that his breath was warm against her forehead, awareness that despite the terrifying circumstances, she felt safer than she had in months. "There you are," Marcus said softly, and Eliza realized her eyes had opened, that she was looking up at him. "Welcome back." Her voice came out as a croak. She swallowed and tried again. "I'm alive. You are." Something that might have been a smile touched his bearded face. "Stubborn thing, aren't you?" Eliza didn't feel stubborn. She felt exhausted and confused and overwhelmed. Tears suddenly spilled down her cheeks. "Hey now," Marcus said, his voice going even softer. "You're safe. I've got you." And that just made her cry harder, because no one had said those words to her in so long. No one had held her like this, with gentleness and care, in years. Not since her father died. Certainly not since Henry Blackwell had bought her from her debts and called it a marriage. Marcus didn't shush her or tell her to stop. He just held her, one massive hand stroking her hair while she cried out months of fear and pain and loneliness against his chest. Finally, when the tears subsided, Eliza became aware of just how improper their situation was. She tried to pull back, but Marcus's arms tightened slightly. "Not yet," he said. "Your core temperature is still too low. Another hour at least." "This isn't—" "We shouldn't," Eliza stammered. "Probably not," Marcus agreed, "but I'm not letting you die for the sake of propriety." Eliza had no argument for that. She lay still in his arms, listening to the crackle of the fire, feeling his warmth seep into her bones. The cabin was simple but clean. One room with the bed, a table, a couple of chairs, a small stove in addition to the fireplace. Furs hung on the walls. A rifle rested above the door. "Do you live here?" she asked. "Sometimes. I trap in these mountains during winter. This is one of my cabins. There are others, 3 more, spread out through the territory. Wherever I am when the snow gets too deep, that's where I stay until spring. A trapper. A mountain man." Eliza had heard stories about such men, wild, uncivilized, more animal than human. But Marcus's voice was educated, his speech careful. and his hands, though rough and calloused, had been nothing but gentle with her. "The stagecoach," she said suddenly. "The other passengers. There's a way station about 5 miles west. They'll have made it there by now. Sent someone back to Helena for help. The road was washed out from the storm last week. The driver shouldn't have tried to cross. He said we had to reach Fort Ellis before the next storm hit. Fort Ellis is 40 miles north. You weren't going to make it." Marcus shifted slightly, adjusting the blankets around them. "What were you doing on that stage?" The question was casual, but Eliza felt her whole body tense. Marcus noticed immediately. "Easy," he murmured, "just making conversation. You don't have to tell me anything." But maybe that was exactly why Eliza wanted to tell him, because this stranger who had saved her life expected nothing from her, had no claim on her, no right to her story, which made it safe to share. "I was running away," she said quietly, "from Boston. From a marriage." Marcus was silent for a moment. "A bad marriage, the worst." Eliza's throat tightened. "My father died 2 years ago. Left debts. Terrible debts. Henry Blackwell paid them, and in return..." She couldn't finish. "In return, he got you." "Yes." Marcus's chest rumbled with something that might have been a growl. "And you were running to..." "My mother's sister, Aunt Caroline. She runs a boarding house in Bozeman. I wrote to her, told her I was coming. I thought if I could just get there, I'd be free." Eliza laughed bitterly. "Instead, I almost drowned." "You didn't, though." Marcus's hand had resumed its gentle stroking of her hair. "You're here. You're alive. That counts for something." "Does it?" Eliza whispered. "Henry will come looking for me. He always does. He has connections, money. He'll find me and drag me back, and it will be worse than before. He'll have to get through me first." The words were said so simply, so matter-of-factly, that it took Eliza a moment to process them. She tilted her head back to look at Marcus's face. "You don't even know me," she said. "I know you were brave enough to run. I know you fought to stay alive in that river, and I know no woman deserves to be bought like property." His storm-grey eyes met hers. "I also know I'm not letting anyone hurt you, not while you're under my protection." Something warm unfurled in Eliza's chest, something that had nothing to do with the physical heat of his body. When was the last time someone had wanted to protect her? When was the last time she'd felt anything but fear? "Why?" she asked. "Why would you do that for a stranger?" Marcus was quiet for so long that Eliza thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough with old pain. "I had a sister once, Emma. She was 17 when she married a man from Denver. Rich man, respectable. 6 months later, she was dead. He claimed she fell down the stairs." Marcus's arms tightened around Eliza. "But I saw the bruises at her funeral. I saw the fear in her eyes the last time I visited, and I did nothing. I thought it wasn't my place to interfere in a marriage." "Marcus, I won't make that mistake again," he said firmly. "So you'll stay here until you're strong enough to travel. Then I'll take you to Bozeman myself, make sure you reach your aunt safely. And if this Henry Blackwell comes looking, he'll find me instead." Eliza didn't know what to say. Gratitude seemed too small a word for what she felt. This man, this stranger, was offering her everything she'd been praying for. Safety, protection, a chance. "Thank you," she whispered. "Don't thank me yet. You're stuck with me in this cabin until the next supply run comes through in 3 days. I'm not the best company. You saved my life. You're holding me while I recover from hypothermia. I think your company is just fine." Was that a flush creeping up Marcus's neck? Eliza couldn't be sure in the firelight, but she thought she saw color touch his cheeks above his beard. "You should sleep," he said gruffly. "Your body needs to recover." Eliza was exhausted. It was true. The ordeal had drained every ounce of energy from her, but she was also acutely aware that the moment she fell asleep, she would wake up, and this strange intimacy would be over. This moment, where she felt safe and warm and protected, would end. She didn't want it to end, but her body had other ideas. Her eyelids grew heavy, and despite her best efforts to stay awake, she drifted off with her head pillowed on Marcus Stone's chest, listening to the steady thunder of his heartbeat. When Eliza woke, it was dark outside, and the fire had burned down to embers. She was alone in the bed, wrapped in blankets and furs, but she could hear movement across the cabin. She sat up carefully, clutching the furs to her chest. Marcus was at the stove, fully dressed now in dry buckskins, stirring something in a pot. He glanced over his shoulder when he heard her move. "How do you feel?" "Sore," Eliza admitted. and hungry. Good signs both. He ladled whatever he was cooking into a bowl and brought it over. Venison stew. It's not fancy, but it'll help you recover. Eliza took the bowl gratefully, suddenly ravenous. The stew was simple, but good. Chunks of meat, wild onions, some kind of root vegetable. She ate it quickly, barely pausing to breathe. Marcus watched her with something that might have been amusement in his eyes. When did you last eat? Yesterday morning. At the way station. Eliza scraped the last of the stew from the bowl. Thank you. That was wonderful. There's more if you want it. She did want it desperately, but she was also becoming increasingly aware of her situation. She was naked under these furs, and Marcus was standing 3 feet away, watching her. I don't suppose my clothes survived, she asked. Marcus shook his head. They were ruined. The cold and the river destroyed them. He gestured to a bundle on the chair. I've got some spare things. A shirt, some pants. They'll be too big, but they're dry and warm. I can't wear pants, Eliza said automatically, and then realized how ridiculous that sounded. She'd just survived death by hypothermia. Propriety seemed like a distant concern. You can hear? Marcus said simply. No one to judge you but me, and I don't give a damn what you wear as long as you're warm. There was something liberating in that. Eliza had spent her entire life worried about what people thought, what was proper, what was acceptable for a young woman of her station. And where had it gotten her? Trapped in a marriage to a monster, nearly dead in a frozen river. All right, she said, but you'll have to turn around. Marcus did, facing the wall while Eliza quickly dressed in his spare clothes. The shirt hung to her knees, and she had to roll the pants up several times, but they were warm and soft from wear. They smelled like pine and wood smoke, and something else, something distinctly masculine that made her pulse quicken in a way she didn't quite understand. You can look now, she said. Marcus turned back, and his eyes widened slightly before he schooled his expression. You look like a child playing dress-up. I feel ridiculous. You look, he paused, seeming to search for words. You look comfortable. That's what matters. Eliza looked down at herself and realized he was right. For the first time in years, she wasn't corseted and pinched and bound into submission. She could breathe fully, could move without restriction. It felt strange and wonderful at the same time. Over the next 3 days, a strange sort of domestic routine developed. Marcus would wake early and check his trap lines, returning with game that he'd skin and prepare, while Eliza watched, fascinated despite the gore. He taught her how to make journey bread, how to prepare hides, how to read the weather in the clouds. Eliza, for her part, took over the cooking and cleaning, bringing order to the cabin in a way that made Marcus shake his head in wonder. Haven't seen this place this clean in 5 years, he admitted one evening as they sat by the fire. When did you last have company? Eliza asked. Besides you? Never. This cabin is just for me. You live alone all the time? Marcus nodded. Prefer it that way. People are complicated. The mountains are simple. But Eliza was learning that Marcus Stone was anything but simple. He read actual books, poetry even, which he kept wrapped in oilcloth to protect from the elements. He played a battered harmonica with surprising skill. And he spoke 3 languages, including Shoshone, which he'd learned from the tribes in the area. How did a man like you end up alone in the mountains? Eliza asked one night. Marcus was quiet for a long time, staring into the fire. Finally, he said, after Emma died, I couldn't stay in civilization anymore. Couldn't stand the pretense of it all, the polite society that let monsters walk among them as long as they had money and status. So I left, came west, found the mountains, found peace. Aren't you lonely? Was, Marcus said, glancing at her. Before. The look in his eyes made Eliza's breath catch. There was something there, something heated and hungry, that he quickly shuttered away. But she'd seen it, and more importantly, she'd felt an answering pull low in her belly. This was dangerous territory. She was a married woman, technically, even if it was a marriage she'd never wanted. And Marcus was, well, he was saving her, helping her, giving her shelter. Anything she felt was probably just gratitude. Probably. But when his hand accidentally brushed hers as they both reached for the water bucket, and lightning seemed to spark between them, Eliza knew it was more than gratitude. On the 3rd night, as they sat by the fire after dinner, Marcus cleared his throat. Supply wagon comes through tomorrow, he said. I'll get you on it. Make sure they take you to Bozeman. Eliza's heart sank. Tomorrow. You need to get to your aunt. Get somewhere safe. I am safe, here, with you. Marcus's jaw clenched. Eliza, I don't want to go, she said quietly. Not yet. You have to. This isn't— I can't— He stood abruptly, pacing to the window. You don't belong here, in this wilderness, in this cabin, with someone like me, someone like you. Eliza stood too, anger flashing through her. Someone who saved my life, someone who's been nothing but kind and respectful, someone who makes me feel safer than I've felt in years, someone who's killed men. Marcus said harshly, turning to face her. Someone who's more comfortable with wolves than people. Someone who's been alone so long, he's forgotten how to be anything else. I don't believe that. You should. He took a step toward her, and Eliza could see the war happening in his eyes. You should get on that wagon tomorrow and never look back. Go to your aunt. Start a new life. Find a good man who can give you everything you deserve. And what if I've already found him? The words hung in the air between them. Marcus went very still. You don't know what you're saying, he said, his voice rough. I know exactly what I'm saying. Eliza crossed the small space between them, close enough now to feel the heat radiating from his body. I know that I'm still married to a man I hate. I know that I'm running away from a life that was killing me, but I also know that these 3 days with you have been the happiest I've had in years. And I know that when I look at you, I feel something I've never felt before. Eliza, Marcus breathed her name like a prayer and a curse. I'm twice your age. I've got nothing to offer you but this cabin and a hard life in the mountains. You're not twice my age. You're maybe 35, 40 at most. And you're offering me something no one else ever has. A choice. The freedom to choose. You can't choose this. Choose me. You don't understand what you'd be giving up. I'm giving up nothing I wanted in the first place. Eliza reached up, her small hand touching his bearded cheek. Marcus, I don't know what this is between us, but I know I want to find out. Don't send me away. Not yet. Marcus closed his eyes, and Eliza could see the struggle written across his face. When he opened them again, the heat she'd glimpsed before was burning openly now. If I kiss you, he said, his voice dropping to a rumble that she felt in her bones, I won't be able to let you go. Good, Eliza whispered. With a groan that sounded like surrender, Marcus pulled her against him and claimed her mouth with his. The kiss was nothing like the chaste pecks Henry had occasionally bestowed upon her. This was fire and hunger and desperate need. Marcus kissed her like she was air, and he'd been drowning, his big hands cradling her face with a gentleness that made her heart ache. Eliza had never been kissed like this, had never wanted to be kissed like this, but now that she was, she never wanted it to stop. She pressed closer, her hands sliding up his chest, feeling the rapid thunder of his heartbeat under her palms. Marcus pulled back slightly, his breathing ragged. We should stop. I don't want to stop. Eliza, I'm trying to be honorable here. I don't want honorable, she said fiercely. I've had a lifetime of men being honorable while they treated me like property. You asked what I want to choose, Marcus. I'm choosing this. I'm choosing you. Something broke in Marcus's control. He kissed her again, deeper this time, his tongue sliding against hers in a way that made her knees weak. He walked her backward until her legs hit the bed, and they tumbled onto it together, a tangle of limbs and desperate touches. Tell me to stop, Marcus growled against her neck, his teeth grazing her pulse point. Tell me this is wrong. It's not wrong, Eliza gasped. It's the first thing that's felt right in years. His hands were everywhere, her waist, her back, sliding under the oversized shirt to touch bare skin. Eliza arched into him, craving more, wanting everything he could give her. I've wanted this since I pulled you from that river, Marcus confessed, his voice rough with need. Wanted you. I tried to tell myself it was wrong, that you were vulnerable, that I was taking advantage. But God help me, Eliza, I can't resist you anymore. Then don't, she whispered. Don't resist. Just be with me. What followed was awkward and tender, and achingly sweet. Marcus was patient, guiding her through everything with gentle hands and gentler words. He worshipped her body with a reverence that brought tears to her eyes, showing her what it meant to be truly wanted, truly cherished. And when it was over, when they lay tangled together in the narrow bed, Eliza felt something shift inside her, a piece of herself that had been frozen for so long, finally thawing, coming back to life. What have we done? She whispered, but there was no regret in her voice. Marcus pressed a kiss to her forehead. Something that can't be undone. Something that binds us together. I'm still married to Henry, not in any way that matters. He doesn't own you, Eliza. He never did. The law says otherwise. The law is wrong. Marcus pulled her closer. I don't know what happens next, but I know I'm not letting you go. Not now. Not ever. Eliza wanted to believe him, wanted to believe they could have this, have each other, but reality was already creeping back in. Henry would be looking for her, and when he found her, "He'll come for me," she said quietly. "Eventually he'll find me. Then I'll be ready. Marcus, he's powerful. He has money, connections. He could make your life very difficult. I've faced down grizzlies and mountain lions. I've survived winters that killed stronger men. I'm not afraid of some Boston dandy with a fat wallet." Marcus tilted her face up to his. "The question is, what do you want? Because I'll help you get to Bozeman, if that's what you choose. I'll make sure you reach your aunt safely, and I'll fade back into these mountains. But if you want to stay, if you want to see where this goes between us, then you're welcome here for as long as you want." Eliza's heart was pounding. This was it, the moment of choice. She could play it safe, go to Aunt Caroline, try to disappear into a new life in Bozeman, or she could take the biggest risk of her life and stay with a man she barely knew, in a wilderness that could kill her as easily as that river almost had. But somehow the choice wasn't difficult at all. "I want to stay," she said, "at least for a while. I want to see what this is, what we could be." Marcus's whole face transformed, a smile breaking across his features like sunrise over the mountains. Yeah, Eliza smiled back. "But I do need to write to my aunt. Let her know I'm safe. She'll be worried. The supply wagon can take a letter. I'll make sure it gets to her." They spent the rest of the night planning, talking, stealing kisses between words. When the supply wagon rumbled up to the cabin the next morning, Marcus sent it on its way with a letter for Aunt Caroline and a promise to the driver that he'd bring Eliza to Bozeman himself in a few weeks. The weeks turned into months. Winter settled over the mountains in earnest, and Eliza learned what it meant to live in the wilderness. Marcus taught her to shoot, to track, to read the signs of coming weather. She taught him to enjoy the small domestic comforts, a clean cabin, hot meals, the sound of laughter. They were happy, genuinely impossibly happy, in a way that Eliza had never imagined possible. The first month was an adjustment. Eliza had grown up in Boston's finest neighborhoods, attended the best schools, learned to pour tea and make polite conversation. None of that prepared her for life in a mountain cabin during the harshest winter Wyoming had seen in a decade. "You'll need to learn to shoot," Marcus told her one morning in early December, pulling out a smaller rifle he'd acquired from a passing trader. "Not just for protection, for food too. I can't always be here." Eliza's hands shook as she held the weapon. "I've never even touched a gun before." "I know. That's why we're starting now." Marcus positioned himself behind her, his chest against her back, his arms coming around to guide her hands. "See that pine cone on the stump? That's your target." The nearness of him made it hard to concentrate. Even after weeks of sharing a bed, of learning each other's bodies in the darkness, Eliza still felt her pulse race every time he touched her. "Focus," Marcus murmured in her ear, and she could hear the amusement in his voice. He knew exactly what effect he had on her. Eliza took a breath and squeezed the trigger. The recoil knocked her back against Marcus's solid chest, and the shot went wide, hitting a tree 3 feet from the target. "Not bad for a first try," Marcus said. Again, they practiced every morning for a week until Eliza could hit the target more often than not. She learned to clean the rifle, to load it, to respect its power, and slowly she began to feel less like a fragile city girl and more like someone who belonged in this wild place. Marcus taught her other things too, how to tan hides so they stayed soft and supple, how to make soap from animal fat and lye, how to preserve meat for the long winter, how to read tracks in the snow, deer, elk, rabbit, and the more dangerous signs of mountain lion or bear. "You see these marks?" Marcus pointed to scratches on a tree trunk one afternoon as they checked his trap lines together. "Bear, big one, probably a male, made these about 2 days ago." Eliza looked at the gouges, which were well above her head. "How do you know it was 2 days ago?" "The sap. See how it's started to dry but isn't completely hardened yet? Fresh scratches would still be wet. Old ones would be completely sealed over." He studied the ground around the tree. He was heading west, away from the cabin, but we'll keep an eye out anyway. These lessons were interspersed with moments of tenderness that took Eliza's breath away. Marcus reading poetry to her by firelight, his deep voice turning Wordsworth and Keats into something intimate and precious. Marcus braiding her hair with surprising gentleness, his rough fingers careful not to pull. Marcus pulling her into his arms in the middle of the day for no reason except that he wanted to hold her. "What are you thinking about?" Eliza asked him one evening as they lay in bed, her head on his chest. "How different my life is now," Marcus said quietly. 6 months ago, I thought I'd die alone in these mountains, probably get mauled by a bear or freeze to death in a blizzard. Seemed like a fitting end for someone like me." "Don't say that. It's true. I'd made peace with it." His hand stroked her hair. "And then you fell into that river, and everything changed. Do you regret it? Pulling me out?" Marcus tilted her face up to his. "I regret a lot of things in my life, Eliza Stone, but you, never. Not for a single second." He kissed her then, slow and deep, and Eliza felt that now familiar warmth spreading through her body. Even after all these weeks, the desire between them hadn't dimmed. If anything, it had grown stronger, more intense. "I love you," she whispered against his lips. "I love you too, more than I thought I could love anyone." But their peaceful existence couldn't last forever. The first sign of trouble came in late January, when a traveling preacher stopped at the cabin seeking shelter from a storm. Reverend Thomas was a thin, severe man with sharp eyes that missed nothing. He accepted Marcus's hospitality, but made his disapproval clear. "You two married?" he asked over dinner. Marcus and Eliza exchanged glances. "Not legally," Marcus admitted, "but we're committed to each other." "Living in sin, then?" The Reverend shook his head. "That's a grievous offense in the eyes of the Lord." "With all due respect, Reverend, our relationship is between us and God," Eliza said firmly. "We don't need your judgment." The preacher's eyes narrowed. "You sound like a woman with something to hide. Running from something, perhaps?" Marcus's hand found Eliza's under the table, squeezing gently. "The lady's past is her own business, perhaps. Or perhaps she's someone's wife, living in adultery with another man." Reverend Thomas leaned back in his chair. "I make it my business to know the people in my territory, and I've heard tell of a wealthy Boston gentleman searching for his missing wife, offering a reward for information." Eliza felt the blood drained from her face. Henry was still looking for her. "Even if such a woman existed," Marcus said, his voice gone deadly quiet, "and even if she had good reason to run, would you really condemn her to a life of misery for the sake of a legal document? The sanctity of marriage. The sanctity of marriage means nothing when one person treats the other like property, when fists do the talking instead of words, when fear is the foundation instead of love." Marcus stood, his considerable height making the Reverend shrink back. "The storm's past. I think it's time you moved on, Reverend." After the preacher left, Eliza collapsed into a chair, shaking. "He's going to tell Henry. He's going to tell him where I am." "Maybe. Probably." Marcus knelt in front of her, taking her hands. "But we've got time. Even if he sends word today, it'll be weeks before anyone could get here through the winter snow. We can prepare." "How do you prepare for someone like Henry? He has money, power, men who'll do whatever he asks. And I have these mountains. I know every trail, every hiding place, every dangerous pass. If he comes for you, I'll be ready." But the encounter with Reverend Thomas had shaken something loose in Eliza. That night, she couldn't sleep, tossing and turning, until Marcus pulled her close. "Talk to me," he said. "What's going through that head of yours?" "I'm afraid," Eliza admitted. "Not just of Henry finding me. I'm afraid of what will happen to you if he does. He won't just take me back, Marcus. He'll make sure you pay for stealing me. He'll destroy you if he can. Let him try. You don't understand. Henry doesn't fight fair. He'll use the law against you, claim you kidnapped me, that you're holding me against my will. He'll make you out to be a monster." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "What if we made it legal? Our marriage, I mean." Eliza sat up, staring at him. "How? I'm already married to Henry." "Technically, yes. But you said yourself he thinks you're dead." "The stagecoach accident. If we go to Bozeman, find a judge who's sympathetic, maybe we can make a case. Abandonment, cruelty, whatever we need to claim. Get that marriage annulled or dissolved, and then marry me properly. That could take months, years even, and it would require lawyers, money." "I have money," Marcus interrupted. "Not a lot, but enough. I've been trapping these mountains for 10 years, and I don't spend much. It's all saved up, waiting for something worth spending it on." He cupped her face. "You're worth spending it on, Eliza. You're worth everything." Tears spilled down Eliza's cheeks. "You'd do that for me?" "I'd do anything for you. Don't you know that by now?" They made plans to go to Bozeman as soon as the worst of the winter passed. But before they could leave, another visitor arrived. This time, it was a woman. Eliza was hanging laundry on the line Marcus had strung between two pines when she heard the horse. Her hand immediately went to the rifle Marcus insisted she keep nearby, but she relaxed when she saw it was a woman riding alone, clearly exhausted. The woman slid off her horse and nearly collapsed. Eliza ran to catch her. "Please!" the woman gasped. "Please help me. I've been riding for 2 days straight. Come inside. I'll get you warm. Get you fed." The woman was young, maybe 19 or 20, with blonde hair and frightened blue eyes. Over hot coffee and stew, her story came tumbling out. Her name was Sarah Mitchell. She'd been engaged to a man in Billings, but a week before the wedding, she'd discovered he already had a wife in Denver. When she'd tried to break it off, he'd threatened her, said he'd ruin her reputation if she didn't go through with the marriage. "I didn't know where else to go," Sarah said, tears streaming down her face. "I heard about a woman living in these mountains with a trapper. Heard she'd run away from a bad situation too. I thought maybe you'd understand. Maybe you'd help me." Eliza looked at this frightened girl and saw herself 6 months ago, desperate, alone, with nowhere to turn. "You can stay here as long as you need," Eliza said firmly. "We'll figure something out." When Marcus returned from checking his traps and found another woman in his cabin, he looked baffled. But after Eliza explained, his expression softened. "She can take the spare room once we finish building it," he said. "Until then, she can sleep by the fire. It's warm enough." Over the next few weeks, Sarah became part of their little household. She was handy with a needle and thread, and she helped Eliza make new clothes, mend old ones. She learned to cook, to clean hides, to do all the tasks that mountain life required. And slowly, Eliza realized something. She and Marcus were creating something more than just a life together. They were creating a refuge, a place where people who didn't fit anywhere else could come and be safe. "We should make it official," Eliza said one night. "Not just our marriage. What we're doing here. We should let people know that if they need help, if they're running from something, they can come here." Marcus looked skeptical. "That could bring trouble." "Trouble's coming anyway. Might as well make it mean something." He couldn't argue with that logic. By the time February arrived, they had 4 people living in and around the cabin. Sarah Mitchell, a young man named Thomas, who'd run away from an abusive father. An older woman, widow named Clara, who'd lost her homestead to a crooked land dealer and had nowhere else to go. Marcus expanded the cabin, built 2 more small structures nearby. The little clearing became a community, and Eliza found herself happier than she'd ever been, even with the constant fear of Henry's arrival hanging over her head. "You've created something special here," Clara told her one evening as they prepared dinner together. "A family, not by blood but by choice." "Is it enough?" Eliza asked. "Can choice be as strong as blood?" "Stronger," Clara said firmly. "Blood doesn't always care for you, but the people you choose, they're there because they want to be." Those words stayed with Eliza, and when Marcus proposed that they make the journey to Bozeman to see about dissolving her marriage to Henry, she felt ready. Ready to fight for this life they'd built, ready to make it legal and real. But happiness, she was learning, was fragile. It was March when Henry Blackwell arrived. Eliza was out checking the rabbit snares Marcus had taught her to set when she heard the horses. She froze, her heart hammering, because she knew. Somehow, she knew. She ran back to the cabin, bursting through the door. Marcus was cleaning his rifle, and he looked up at her panicked expression. "What's wrong?" "Horses, coming up the mountain path." Marcus was on his feet in an instant, checking the load in his rifle, positioning himself by the window. "How many?" "I don't know. I didn't wait to count." "Get in the back corner. Stay low." But Eliza didn't move. Because if this was Henry, if he'd finally found her, she wasn't going to hide. Not anymore. The horses stopped outside. There was a long moment of silence, and then a familiar voice called out, "Eliza, I know you're in there. Come out, we're going home." "Henry." Eliza's blood ran cold. Marcus's jaw clenched. "Is that him?" "Yes." "How many men does he have with him?" Eliza moved to the window, careful to stay out of sight, and peeked out. Her heart sank. 4, all armed. "Eliza," Henry called again, "don't make this difficult. I've come a long way to fetch you. I'm taking you back to Boston where you belong." Marcus looked at her, and in his eyes she saw a question. "What do you want?" Eliza took a deep breath. For months, she'd been running, hiding, but she was done with that. Done being afraid, she walked to the door and opened it, stepping out onto the porch. Marcus was right behind her, his rifle held casually but ready. Henry Blackwell sat astride a beautiful black horse, looking as polished and civilized as always in his expensive coat and hat. He smiled when he saw her, but it didn't reach his eyes. "There you are, my dear. You've led me on quite a chase." "I'm not going back with you, Henry," Eliza said, her voice steady. "Don't be absurd. You're my wife. Your place is with me. I was never your wife. I was your prisoner." Henry's smile tightened. "I paid good money for you, Eliza. For your father's debts, for your upkeep. You owe me. I owe you nothing. The law says otherwise." Henry's gaze shifted to Marcus. "And you, sir, are harboring another man's wife. That's a crime in most territories." "So is beating a woman," Marcus said quietly. "That's a crime everywhere. I never laid a hand on her in anger." "Liar," Eliza spat. "You beat me every time I displeased you, every time I spoke out of turn, every time I didn't smile enough, didn't bow enough, didn't submit enough to your control." "Careful, Eliza," Henry warned. "You're making quite the scene." "Good. I want everyone to know what you are. A coward who buys women because no one would choose him freely." Henry's face darkened. "Gentlemen," he said to the men flanking him, "retrieve my wife. Use force, if necessary." Two of the men dismounted, starting toward the porch. Marcus stepped in front of Eliza, raising his rifle. "I wouldn't," he said calmly. "This is my land, and the lady said she's not going with you. She doesn't have a choice." "Yes, she does, and so do you. You can leave peacefully, ride back to Boston, and tell everyone she died in that stagecoach accident. Or you can try to take her, and I promise you not all of you will make it off this mountain." One of Henry's men laughed. "It's 4 against 1, mountain man." Marcus smiled, and it was the most dangerous expression Eliza had ever seen. "I've fought bears with worse odds. You sure you want to test me?" There was a long, tense moment. The hired men looked uncertain, hands hovering near their guns, but not quite drawing. Henry's face was turning red. "This isn't over," he said finally. "I'll go to the territorial authorities. I'll have you arrested for kidnapping, for theft of property." "I'm not property," Eliza interrupted. "I'm a person, and I choose to be here with Marcus. You can tell the authorities whatever you want, but I'll tell them the truth about you, about what you did to me, and I'll make sure everyone in Boston knows it too." Henry stared at her, and for the first time, Eliza saw uncertainty in his eyes, because the truth was, his reputation mattered to him, mattered more than she ever had. "You'll regret this," he said coldly. "Both of you." "I doubt it," Marcus said. "Now get off my land." For a moment, Eliza thought Henry might actually try to fight, but then he jerked his horse's reins, wheeling around. "This isn't finished," he called over his shoulder. "I'll see you both in hell before I let her go." But he rode away, his men following. And as the sound of hoofbeats faded into the distance, Eliza felt something inside her break and reform into something stronger. She turned to Marcus, and he was already there, pulling her into his arms. "You were magnificent," he murmured against her hair. "I was terrified. You stood up to him anyway. That takes courage." Eliza pulled back to look at him. "What if he does go to the authorities? What if he causes trouble?" "Let him try. We'll deal with it." Marcus cupped her face in his hands. "But I want you to know something. I meant what I said out there. This is your choice. If you want to go to your aunt, if you think that would be safer, I choose you," Eliza said firmly. "I choose this life, these mountains, this cabin. I choose us." Marcus kissed her then, deep and claiming, and Eliza knew she'd made the right decision. But the confrontation with Henry had consequences neither of them anticipated. 2 weeks later, a territorial marshal arrived at the cabin. He was an older man with kind eyes and a weathered face, and he introduced himself as Marshal William Crawford. "I'm here about a complaint filed by a Mr. Henry Blackwell of Boston," he said, though his tone suggested he wasn't entirely comfortable with his mission. "He claims his wife is being held here against her will." "I'm not being held against my will," Eliza said immediately. "I left Henry because he was cruel to me. I'm here because I choose to be." Marshal Crawford nodded slowly. "That's what I figured when I saw you. Woman being held prisoner doesn't usually answer the door with a rifle in one hand and a baby on her hip." Eliza flushed, realizing she was still holding the weapon she'd grabbed when she heard the horse approaching. There was no baby yet, but the marshal's point stood. "Mr. Blackwell was quite insistent," the marshal continued. "Said you'd been brainwashed, coerced. He's prepared to take this to a territorial judge if necessary." "Let him," Marcus said, stepping up beside Eliza. "We've got witnesses who can testify to what kind of man he is." "I'm sure you do. But the law is the law, and technically Mrs. Blackwell is still married to him." The marshal held up a hand when Marcus started to protest. "I said technically. Now I've been doing this job for 20 years, and I've learned to read people pretty well. And what I see here is a woman who's happy, healthy, and clearly capable of making her own decisions." "Then why are you here?" Eliza asked. "Because I have to file a report. Have to make it official that I investigated the complaint." Marshal Crawford pulled out a notebook. "Now, Mrs. Blackwell, or would you prefer another name?" "Eliza Stone," she said firmly. "Miss Stone, then. Can you tell me, in your own words, why you left your husband?" And Eliza did. She told him everything. The arranged marriage to pay her father's debts, the isolation Henry imposed on her, the beatings that started small, a slap, a shove, and escalated over time, the way he controlled every aspect of her life, from what she wore to who she spoke to. The night she finally fled, stealing money from his desk and buying a ticket on the first stagecoach heading west. Marshal Crawford listened without interrupting, making notes. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "That's a serious accusation," he said finally. "Abuse, coercion, false imprisonment. If even half of what you say is true, Mr. Blackwell should be facing charges, not filing them." "It's all true," Eliza said. "Every word. I believe you. But believing you and proving it in court are two different things. You'd need witnesses, evidence, a lawyer willing to take on a wealthy man from back east." "I can get witnesses," Eliza said. "My aunt in Bozeman saw the bruises. The servants in Henry's house knew what was happening, and I kept a diary, documented everything. It's hidden at my aunt's boarding house." The marshal's eyebrows rose. "You have written evidence?" "Yes. Dates, times, descriptions of what he did. I thought maybe someday I'd need proof. So I kept track." "Smart girl." Marshal Crawford closed his notebook. "Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to file a report saying I investigated and found no evidence of kidnapping or coercion. I'm going to recommend that Mr. Blackwell's complaint be dismissed. And I'm going to suggest that if he's so concerned about his wife's welfare, perhaps he should have treated her better when he had the chance." "Will that be enough to stop him?" Marcus asked. "Probably not. Man like that, he'll keep pushing, but it'll buy you time." The marshal mounted his horse. "My advice, get yourself a good lawyer. File for divorce or annulment, whatever will stick. Make it official that you're done with him, and if he shows up here again causing trouble, you send word to me. I don't take kindly to men who beat women." After the marshal left, Eliza felt a strange mix of relief and anxiety. The immediate threat had passed, but Henry wasn't going to give up. She knew him well enough to know that. "We need to go to Bozeman," Marcus said, echoing her thoughts. "Soon, before he makes his next move." They left the following week, leaving the cabin and their small community in the care of Thomas and Clara. The journey to Bozeman took 3 days on horseback, following trails that were still muddy from the spring thaw. Aunt Caroline's boarding house was a cheerful yellow building on the main street, and when she opened the door and saw Eliza, she burst into tears. "My dear girl, I've been so worried. Your letter said you were safe, but I couldn't help imagining the worst." Eliza hugged her aunt tightly. "I'm sorry I worried you, but I'm well, truly. Better than I've been in years." Caroline pulled back and studied Marcus, who stood awkwardly on the porch, his mountain man appearance drawing curious stares from passers-by. "And you must be the man who saved her life," Caroline said. "Yes, ma'am, Marcus Stone." "Well, Mr. Stone, any man who makes my niece smile like that is welcome in my home. Come in, both of you. We have much to discuss." Over tea and cake, Eliza explained everything. The river, the rescue, the months in the cabin, the growing feelings between them, Henry's arrival and the marshal's visit. And finally, their hope to dissolve the marriage legally. "It won't be easy," Caroline warned. "Henry has money and influence, and divorce is still scandalous, especially for a woman." "I don't care about scandal," Eliza said. I care about being free. Caroline smiled. That's my girl. All right then. I know a lawyer here in town, Daniel Winters. He's young but sharp, and he's not afraid to take on difficult cases. I'll arrange a meeting. Daniel Winters turned out to be everything Caroline promised. He was 30 years old, with intelligent eyes and a no-nonsense manner. He listened to Eliza's story, examined the diary she'd kept, and nodded thoughtfully. You have a strong case for annulment, based on coercion and duress, he said. The fact that your father's debts were used to force you into the marriage, combined with the documented abuse, gives us solid grounds. The challenge will be jurisdiction. Blackwell will argue that the marriage took place in Massachusetts, so it should be adjudicated there. Can we fight that? Marcus asked. We can. You're residents of Wyoming territory now. You have the right to petition for relief here. It will take time. Probably 6 months to a year, and it will be expensive. Marcus didn't hesitate. How much? When Winters named his fee, Eliza gasped. It was more money than she'd ever seen in her life, but Marcus just nodded. I'll get you half now. The rest when the annulment comes through. You don't have to do this, Eliza said as they left the lawyer's office. That money, it's everything you've saved. It's just money, Eliza. You're my life. There's no comparison. They stayed in Bozeman for 2 weeks, while Winters filed the initial petitions and gathered evidence. Eliza gave statements, as did Aunt Caroline. They even managed to track down one of Henry's former servants, a woman named Mary, who'd fled his employ 6 months before Eliza's escape. Her testimony about Henry's violence was damning. He was a monster to everyone, Mary told the lawyer, not just to Mrs. Blackwell. He beat the stable boy once for letting a horse throw a shoe, broke his arm, and when the cook burned dinner, he threw the pot at her head. Gave her a scar she'll carry the rest of her life. With each piece of evidence, Eliza felt the chains that bound her to Henry weakening. Not gone yet, but loosening. She could almost taste freedom, but freedom, it turned out, came with a price. Henry fought back viciously. He hired his own lawyers, filed counter-petitions, claimed Eliza was mentally unstable and had abandoned him without cause. He painted himself as the wronged husband, generous and kind, whose ungrateful wife had run off with a brutish mountain man. The case dragged on for 8 months. 8 months of depositions and hearings and legal maneuvering, 8 months of watching Marcus spend every penny he'd saved, then go into debt, all to free her from a marriage she'd never wanted. Eliza hated it. Hated that Marcus was paying this price. Hated that Henry could still reach across 1,000 miles and make her life miserable. It's worth it, Marcus said every time she tried to talk to him about the cost. You're worth it. Finally, in November, almost exactly 1 year after Eliza had fallen into the Snake River, Judge Harrison delivered his ruling. Having reviewed all evidence and testimony, the judge said, his voice echoing through the courtroom, I find that the marriage between Eliza Morton and Henry Blackwell was entered into under coercion and duress. The documentation of systematic abuse and the testimony of multiple witnesses paint a clear picture of a marriage that was never valid in any moral sense, regardless of its legal status. Therefore, I hereby grant an annulment of said marriage. Mrs. Blackwell is free to remarry as she sees fit. Eliza couldn't breathe. She sat frozen in her chair, unable to process the words she'd just heard. Did he say, she whispered to Marcus. You're free, Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. You're finally free. And then Eliza was crying, great heaving sobs of relief and joy, and Marcus was holding her, and the whole courtroom seemed to be celebrating with them. They were married 3 weeks later, in a small ceremony in Bozeman with Aunt Caroline as witness. It wasn't legal, technically, since Eliza was still tied to Henry, but a friendly judge who'd heard about her situation was willing to look the other way, especially after Aunt Caroline testified to the bruises she'd seen on Eliza during her visit to Boston. Henry never came back. They heard months later that he'd returned to Boston and told everyone his wife had died in the stagecoach accident. In a way, Eliza Morton had died, but someone new had been born in her place. Eliza Stone, mountain woman, trapper's wife, survivor. They were married the very next day, in a small ceremony in Bozeman with Aunt Caroline as witness. This time it was legal, binding, real. Eliza wore a simple white dress that Caroline had helped her make, with wildflowers in her hair that Marcus had picked that morning. He wore his best clothes, still buckskins, but clean and carefully brushed, his beard neatly trimmed. "Do you, Marcus Stone, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" the judge asked. "I do," Marcus said, his voice steady and sure. "Today and every day for the rest of my life." "And do you, Eliza Morton, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Eliza looked at Marcus, this man who had saved her life in more ways than one, who had fought for her, protected her, loved her, and felt her heart swell with so much emotion she thought it might burst. "I do," she said, "with all my heart." When they kissed as husband and wife, legally bound at last, Eliza felt tears streaming down her face. Happy tears this time, joyful tears. "I love you, Mrs. Stone," Marcus whispered against her lips. "I love you too, Mr. Stone. Forever." The celebration afterward was small but perfect. Caroline had prepared a feast: roast chicken, fresh bread, apple pie. Sarah, Thomas, and Clara had made the journey to Bozeman to celebrate with them. Even Marshal Crawford stopped by to offer his congratulations. "You two did good," he said, shaking Marcus's hand. "Not many people fight that hard for what's right." "We had to," Marcus said simply. "Some things are worth fighting for." As the evening wore on and the guests gradually departed, Eliza found herself alone with Marcus in the room Caroline had prepared for them. It was the first time they'd been truly alone since the wedding, and suddenly Eliza felt shy. "What are you thinking about?" Marcus asked, loosening his collar. "That this is real now. We're really married. Legally, officially, in every way that matters." Marcus crossed to her, taking her hands in his. "Does it feel different?" "Yes and no. I've felt married to you since that first night in the cabin when you pulled me back from death. This just makes it official, makes it so no one can ever take you away from me. No one could take me away from you anyway. I'm yours, Eliza. I've been yours since the moment I pulled you from that river." He kissed her then, and it was different from all the kisses that had come before. This wasn't stolen or forbidden or shadowed by fear. This was free and joyful and right. When they finally fell asleep in each other's arms, Eliza felt at peace for the first time in her life. She was exactly where she belonged. They stayed in Bozeman for another week, settling legal matters and spending time with Caroline. But eventually, the mountains called them home. "You'll come visit, won't you?" Caroline asked as she helped Eliza pack. "As often as we can. And you're always welcome at the cabin. We've got room now, with all the additions Marcus built. I might take you up on that next summer. I've always wanted to see the mountains." The journey back to the cabin took 4 days. They rode slowly, stopping often to rest the horses and enjoy the scenery. The November landscape was beautiful in its starkness. Bare trees against grey skies, the first dustings of snow on the highest peaks. "Are you sure about this?" Marcus asked as they made camp the third night. "About spending your life in the wilderness? It's not too late to change your mind. We could settle in Bozeman. I could find work." "Marcus Stone, if you think I went through 8 months of legal hell just to change my mind about where I want to live, you're crazy." Eliza poked him in the chest. "I want the mountains. I want the cabin. I want our life exactly as it is. Even in the winter, when we're snowed in for weeks at a time, especially then. More time alone with you." Marcus grinned and pulled her close. "When you put it that way." When they finally arrived back at the cabin, Sarah, Thomas, and Clara had a surprise waiting for them. They decorated the entire clearing with pine boughs and ribbons and prepared a feast to celebrate the newlyweds' return. "Welcome home," Sarah called as they dismounted. "We wanted to do something special." Eliza was so touched she could barely speak. This ragtag collection of misfits and runaways had become her family, her real family, chosen and cherished. That night, as they all sat around the fire, sharing stories and laughter, Eliza looked around at the faces illuminated by the flickering light. Sarah, who was learning to be strong again after her own close call with a bad marriage. Thomas, who was slowly healing from years of his father's abuse. Clara, who had found purpose again after losing everything. And Marcus, her Marcus, who had created this safe haven for all of them. "What are you thinking about?" Marcus murmured in her ear. "That I'm the luckiest woman alive," Eliza said. Because you nearly drowned and got rescued by an ornery mountain man? Because I fell into that river and found my purpose, found my people, found you. Marcus kissed her temple. I'm the lucky one. You gave me back my life, Eliza. Gave me a reason to care about tomorrow again. As winter settled in earnest over the mountains, life fell into a comfortable rhythm. Marcus ran his trap lines, bringing in furs to sell in the spring. Eliza managed the household, teaching Sarah and the others the skills she'd learned. Thomas proved to have a knack for carpentry and began building furniture for their expanding community. Clara, it turned out, made the best preserves anyone had ever tasted and started a small business selling them at the trading post. They weren't just surviving anymore, they were thriving. In late January, Eliza woke one morning feeling strange. Her stomach was unsettled, and certain smells that had never bothered her before now made her nauseous. You all right? Marcus asked, concerned, when she ran outside to vomit in the snow. I'm fine, just something I ate probably, but it kept happening, morning after morning, for a week straight. And then Clara pulled her aside one afternoon with a knowing look. How long since your monthly courses? She asked gently. Eliza froze. She'd been so busy with the legal battles and the wedding and settling back into mountain life that she hadn't even noticed. I don't know. 8 weeks? Maybe 9? Clara smiled. You're pregnant, dear. I'd bet my best preserving pot on it. Pregnant. Eliza sat down heavily, her mind reeling. A baby. She was going to have a baby. Marcus's baby. The thought terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. That night, she told Marcus, he was cleaning his rifle by the fire when she worked up the courage to speak. I have something to tell you, she said, her voice shaking. Marcus looked up immediately, setting the rifle aside. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. At least I don't think it is. I hope it isn't. Eliza took a deep breath. Marcus, I'm pregnant. For a long moment, Marcus just stared at her. Then his face broke into the widest smile she'd ever seen. You're sure? He asked. Not completely, but Clara thinks so, and she's had 4 children of her own. She knows the signs. Marcus crossed to her in 3 long strides and pulled her into his arms, lifting her off her feet and spinning her around. We're having a baby, he said, wonder in his voice. We're going to be parents. You're happy about it? Happy, Eliza. He set her down gently, his hands cradling her face. I never thought I'd have this. A wife, a family, a child. I thought I'd die alone in these mountains. And now, his voice broke, now I have everything. Eliza cried then, happy tears that Marcus kissed away. The pregnancy was difficult at times. The morning sickness lasted well into the 4th month. The isolation of the mountain winter meant no doctor, no midwife, except Clara's experienced hands. But Eliza had never felt more supported, more cared for. Marcus was attentive to the point of being overbearing. He wouldn't let her lift anything heavy, insisted she rest more, brought her special treats from the trading post whenever he made the trek down the mountain. I'm pregnant, not fragile, Eliza protested when he tried to carry her over a patch of ice. Humor me, Marcus said. I've already nearly lost you once. I'm not taking any chances. As her belly grew, Eliza found herself nesting like a bird, organizing and reorganizing the cabin, making tiny clothes from scraps of fabric, preparing for the life that would soon join theirs. What if I'm not a good mother? She asked Clara one afternoon as they sewed together. What if you are? Clara countered. Eliza, you've got more love in your heart than anyone I know. That baby is going to be cherished beyond measure. The baby came in early August, on a sweltering afternoon, when the heat made Eliza feel like she was melting. The labor was long and painful, lasting through the night and into the next day. Marcus stayed by her side the whole time, holding her hand, wiping her forehead, whispering encouragement. You can do this, he said as another contraction hit. You're the strongest person I know. I can't, Eliza gasped. It hurts too much. You can. You survived a frozen river. You survived Henry Blackwell. You can survive this. And she did. Just as the sun was setting on the 2nd day, Samuel Marcus Stone made his entrance into the world with a healthy cry that echoed through the cabin. A boy! Clara announced, placing the squalling infant on Eliza's chest. A beautiful, perfect boy. Eliza looked down at her son, and felt her heart expand in ways she hadn't known were possible. He was tiny and red-faced and covered in vernix, and he was the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen. "Samuel," she whispered, "after my father." Marcus, who was crying openly now, leaned down to kiss first Eliza, then the baby's downy head. "He's perfect. You're both perfect." In the months that followed, their little community rallied around the new family. Sarah helped with the baby when Eliza was exhausted. Thomas built a beautiful cradle from pine wood, carved with animals and mountains. Clara made blankets and clothes and taught Eliza everything she knew about caring for an infant. And Marcus was transformed by fatherhood. This big, gruff mountain man became gentle as a lamb around his son. He'd spend hours just holding Samuel, talking to him in a soft voice, showing him the mountains that would be his home. "He's too young to understand," Eliza said one evening, watching Marcus point out constellations to the 6-month-old. "Maybe, but I want him to know this place, to love it the way I do, to understand that these mountains raised his father and his father's father before that." "Your father was a mountain man too?" Marcus nodded. "Third generation. My grandfather came west in 1820, when this was all wilderness. Built a life here, raised a family. My father did the same. And now," he looked down at Samuel with wonder, "now my son will carry on that legacy." 2 years later, Eliza stood on the porch of the cabin, expanded now to include a second room and a proper kitchen, and watched Marcus return from his trap lines. A toddler balanced on her hip, dark-haired and grey-eyed like his father. "Mama! Papa!" little Samuel crowed, reaching out chubby arms. Marcus's face lit up at the sight of them, and he broke into a run, sweeping his son into his arms and kissing Eliza soundly. "How are my 2 favorite people?" he asked. "Your 3 favorite people," Eliza corrected, placing his hand on her rounded belly. Marcus's eyes widened. "Again? Already? Apparently you're very persuasive." He laughed, that deep rumbling laugh she loved, and pulled her close. "I love you, Eliza Stone. Never thought I'd say those words to anyone, but I love you more than I thought possible." "I love you too," Eliza said, and meant it with every fiber of her being. As they stood there together, a family forged from tragedy and choice, Eliza thought back to that moment in the icy river, the moment she'd given up, let the darkness take her. She was so glad she'd been wrong, so glad that Marcus Stone had pulled her from those depths and shown her what it meant to truly live. Sometimes the worst moments of our lives are actually doorways to the people we were meant to be, the lives we were meant to lead. Eliza had fallen into that river running from a nightmare, and she'd been rescued by a man who became her dream. If that wasn't worth celebrating, she didn't know what was. Years later, when their children asked how Mama and Papa met, Marcus would tell the story with all the drama it deserved, and Eliza would add her own embellishments, making the kids gasp and laugh. But the heart of the story never changed. A woman who'd given up on love, a man who'd given up on people, and a frozen river that brought them together against all odds. It wasn't the life Eliza had planned, but it was the life she'd chosen, and that made all the difference. The end.